All right, welcome back, everyone. More now from my interview with Ivanka Trump. I got the chance to talk to her about the contrast between the Trump administration's approach to the economy and the Democrats with their Green New Deal and threats of socialism. And we're going to talk about it with my guests here right after this. Take a look.
We created this outside advisory board that's really going to do a couple of things. The first is to help us create awareness around the multiple pathways. Education, it's not higher education or technical education or trade education, it's education. It's education with the goal of the result being an ability to provide for yourself. So having some of these leaders talk about education in different terms, big American companies.
But also small, but I mean, it's interesting because Linda McMahon was part of this conversation and emphasizing the role of small business in all this. And altogether, what it really tells you is that you've got this very distinctive, very kind of pro-enterprise, pro-private sector way of thinking about this. That is a huge contrast with something that's getting a lot of attention, which is of course the Green New Deal, which superficially is all about the environment, but within it you've got an approach to jobs which is very radically different, which is a government guaranteed well-paying job for everyone. That's the promise in the Green New Deal. What do you think of that?
We want to unleash innovation. We want America to be the best place for entrepreneurs, for companies to open and run their businesses. And that will create jobs. That will create investment and productivity, which we had grossly fallen behind on making capital investments that would enable our businesses to compete and thrive. So we want to create a climate where people want to do business in America, and we are creating that climate. And as a result, we have more people working today than any time in the history of this country. I mean, think about that fact in and of itself. It's unbelievable. And another thing that's so amazing when you talk about work and workforce participation rates, last quarter, 73% of the people who came into the workforce came in off the sidelines. They weren't even considered unemployed. They came in completely off the sidelines. They had been outside of the labor force. That is the largest number in the history of keeping this metric, so for decades where that's been true. So these policies are working, and they're working for the people whose jobs were the most vulnerable. And those are the people we're trying to help. We're also trying to help them through our working family agenda by recognizing the realities of modern working families, the enormous cost of childcare for those families, and the necessity of childcare to families who need two incomes, or of course for single parents. And then of course the importance for children of childcare, early childhood education, because they're really one and the same.
Yes, I totally agree with that. But I just want, you've got people who will see that offer from the Democrats, from the progressive Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Here's the Green New Deal, here's a guarantee of a job. And think, yeah, that's what I want, that's simple. What do you say to those people?
I don't think most Americans in their heart want to be given something. I've spent a lot of time traveling around this country over the last 4 years. People want to work for what they get. So I think this idea of a guaranteed minimum is not something most people want. They want the ability to be able to secure a job. They want the ability to live in a country where there's the potential for upward mobility. And the reality is that too many Americans felt that there wasn't the chance to do better or to live a better life than their parents. And that's something that was new. That's something that had just started in the past decade, where there wasn't a sense that you could achieve the American dream and you could be more successful than the generation that came before you. That's starting to change. That's starting to change because there is opportunity, because there is investment. And government intervention, targeted, smart intervention that delivers the right outcomes, which is maintaining workforce attachment and providing people with the ability to work through assisting them with family-friendly policies like paid family leave that incentivizes family cohesion and also workforce attachment. That's good government intervention. But free market capitalism is what's made this country successful.
Not socialism.
Not socialism, no.
And you think that's good? Last quick question. Looking ahead, your father's gearing up for 2020. How's this all going to play out? The argument, you've put it very clearly, free market capitalism versus the socialist guaranteed job alternative. How's that going to play out?
Well, I think fundamentally, if you ask yourself the question, are we better today than we were yesterday or we were 2 years ago? The answer is undoubtedly yes. So as an American family is sitting down and they're thinking about their financial situation relative to a month ago, a year ago, America is doing very well, and it stands in quite sharp contrast to the rest of the world. So not only are we doing well, much of the world has slowed down in terms of the pace of their growth, and our policies are continuing to allow this economy to thrive. So I think when you think about the foreign policy agenda, when you think about the interest in domestic security, and then you think about our economic agenda, Americans are better off today than they were in the past, and I think that's deeply meaningful to all of us. That's what we want. That's what we want in a leader, and the president's proven his ability to execute on that mission.
Ivanka Trump, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
For the last 2 years, advisor to the president, Ivanka Trump, has been leading a serious policy effort on opportunity in America. She's mobilized some of America's biggest businesses to boost their commitment to training and skills. She's helped modernize the federal government's approach to training, and she's pushed for legislation to reform higher education. Of course, all that the superficial establishment media wants to talk about is Jared's security clearance or whatever. I sat down with her last Monday to talk about jobs. Take a look. So your father, when he was running for president, he said, I'm going to be the greatest jobs president anyone's ever seen.
That's right.
And if you look at the facts, I mean, we keep being told facts matter. Well, if you look at the facts in terms of the jobs picture in America today, it's incredibly positive, record low unemployment, more openings than there are people available to fill them with the right skills, etc., etc. It's a great picture, but the work that you're doing with the Workforce Development Initiative and other aspects of that, that's actually about the future and the long-term picture for jobs. Can you explain why that's a problem? Why can't we just rely on a strong economy and assume that everything's going to be okay?
Well, first of all, what you said is 100% right. We have an unbelievable story to tell in terms of this administration's economic agenda. So tax reform, deregulation, coupled with this focus on connecting American workers with American jobs has led to record low unemployment numbers across pretty much every demographic, which is amazing. We have more disabled Americans working today than at any time in history. So it's incredibly inspiring. It's incredibly motivating to all of us to see what was being talked about on the campaign being realized and having just affecting so many millions of lives. But it's also because of the strength of the economy that we can dig deeper. We can ensure that those who are on the sidelines, you had mentioned the fact that for the first time in history, there are more job vacancies than there are unemployed Americans. But there's still many more that are on the sidelines that aren't deemed unemployed, who have been forgotten.
Given up, looking for work.
The ultimate forgotten man and woman. So how can we pull them into the workforce at a time where we have the private sector incentivized to invest in that worker and to train that worker for not just a job today, but ultimately for a career. So we've decided to really focus on the fact that since we have such record low unemployment, we're going to use this as a moment to get the private sector to step up, really focus on the investment they need to be making in their workforce, but also work with us, because at the end of the day, it's the private sector that knows which jobs are at risk of being automated out of existence. They need to inform us of those facts. We need to prepare the American workforce for that inevitability. So technology is exciting. It's disruptive, however. So we have to make sure that we're working hand in hand with the states. Today we had the governors in from across the nation. Their number one issue is workforce development. Their number one issue. And it's a great problem to have.
Well, you can see why, by the way, because if you get someone into a position where they've got a good, well-paying job, that is the foundation for everything else you want to see, for a stable life, for a stable community. It is right at the heart of everything you want to see for the country.
And that's what the American people want. They want to work. I've traveled across this nation. I've been to countless states, visiting with governors, visiting various programs with private sector leaders who are really engaging in investing back into their workforce, reskilling mid to late career workers who are at risk of losing their jobs, but also creating new opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities for younger workforce and the next generation of American worker. And so I've traveled this country and I've talked with countless individuals, and you know, they talk about business optimism, small business optimism, big business optimism, but there's an optimism amongst workers that is deeply inspiring. And to see somebody in rural Appalachia who had lost their job go through one of these retraining programs and have a job on the other end and be able to work for the first time and be able to provide meaningfully for their family, and hear them share how much that meant to their family, their community, their sense of self. It is the greatest privilege in the world to be able to do this work.
So let's look at some of the specifics that you're working on, and just some of the things that you've said about this. I'd like to dig into them a bit deeper. So one thing that you've talked about is how there's a kind of bias within the system at almost every level against the kind of blue-collar job, against the kinds of jobs that do require skills, but not necessarily the kind of classic 4-year college degree, and that the system's geared to that one version of higher education. You'd like to see that change. What are you doing about that?
Well, I think culturally, for a long time, we've created and perpetuated a narrative that there's one pathway to achieving the American dream, and it's 4-year university. And that's been instilled into American students. It's often American parents feel that that's the only viable path. So you have kids going into school, racking up enormous amounts of student debt that they'll often take decades, if they're ever able to pay it off, without a skill if they ultimately graduate. So I think opening up the prism and saying there are many different pathways. It depends what it is that you want in your life, and taking the stigma away from those who choose alternative pathways, who choose technical school, vocational education. At the end of the day, it's about connecting workers with their passion, with their jobs. There's very little opportunities for somebody who wants to go the vocational route, the technical route, because all the money pushes you into the 4-year college system. So one of the things we're working with Congress on doing is higher education reform and opening up Pell Grants and making them available to high quality, shorter term programming. So there are many, many things we can do legislatively, but administratively as well. We created the National Council for the American Worker, that is working to liberate government data, get private sector data included, so people are able to have more transparency around the jobs that are available, breaking down the available jobs and the vacant jobs by the skill required to fill them, because on a basic level, that's where you need to start. If you're a mid to late career worker who wants to learn a new trade, you need to know where your existing skills are applicable. And that's not actually readily available information. So on a federal level, we're no good at doing the job training. That is best done at the states.
That is such a refreshing thing to hear, because for years you've had billions of dollars put into exactly that, into federal job training programs that when they're evaluated turn out literally do no good at all.
Well, they've never been evaluated. So we spend billions of dollars across 15 different agencies on federal training programs that have no measurable outcomes. So as part of this council, we're reviewing each of these programs. Those that work and we can prove work, that's great. Those that don't work will collapse, and truthfully we'd prefer to block grant that money to the states where the programs are actually working, and the governors and the local leaders know which skills they need to enable their markets to grow.